This is the Ambassador Chicago.
Home to one of the city's most iconic eating establishments.
In the historic Pump Room, Booth 1 was the table serving celebrities only.
It even had its own telephone. Everyone wanted to see who was sitting there.
And now, look who's in Booth 1.
Hi, I'm Jim Lovell.
Hi, and welcome to Booth 1.
Joining us is a real American hero.
Stop me if I get carried away with too many space geek questions, okay?
Okay, I'll try. I don't know if that's going to be possible.
As a kid growing up in Milwaukee, he was fascinated by rockets and space exploration. He became the first man to fly 4 missions into space.
First, Gemini 7 and 12, then on man's first flight to the moon, Apollo 8. Finally, on the Apollo 13 mission, where he famously said the words,
Houston, we've had a problem.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Former NASA astronaut, naval aviator, and retired Navy captain, James Lovell. Jim, always good to be with you. Would you like us to serve you some condensed space food so you feel right at home here?
Well, maybe that's not a bad idea, but it's been a long time since we've seen each other.
I know.
And it's nice to be back together again.
It's so great to see you, and a happy belated 90th birthday. That is impossible
wish
to
you
say.
hadn't said
I'm
that.
so sorry.
I didn't look at it. I had all this makeup on.
Other than the glasses, I don't see much change. You're in good shape.
There you go.
You look
Thanks,
exactly the same. Now, John Glenn flew on the shuttle when he was 77. Do you think that you could break his record as the oldest man to fly in space?
Mike. If the shuttle was still going, I think I could do it at 90. I think I could do it. In fact, I offered to be his backup.
You did?
Well, they said I was too old.
I wish the shuttle were still flying. So
I
that could
know.
happen. With all due respect to Apollo 13, as it was famously called a successful failure, wasn't the mission of Apollo 8 much more dramatic, much more dangerous, much more important than any of the missions?
I think you're right in all counts. Actually, Apollo 8 was actually the flight that I admire or wanted to be on most. Apollo 13, of course, was a very critical flight, a very one that, we might not get back. But Apollo 8 was different. There was nothing wrong with the spacecraft. The way it came up into being was unusual. The fact that we took off on December 21st, 1968, which being Chicagoans, you could imagine 1968 was not a very good year in Chicago or the country, and we ended the year with an upbeat, and I think that was really what I wanted to be on.
But the mission was pushed up. There was the Saturn V rocket had not been tested that much. There were some problems with it. You had the Apollo 1 fire just, a couple years prior. There weren't a lot of manned missions before Apollo 8, correct?
Bob, it's a good story how it all got started. Apollo 8 was originally going to go around the Earth, an Earth orbital flight, attached with the lunar module. And we were going to use the lunar module and test it in Earth orbit and then dock it again, get the people out, and then just let it go. 2 things happened in the summer of 1968 that changed the whole mission. The first thing is that Grumman Aircraft, building the lunar module, finally came to the conclusion that they'll never get the vehicle ready for a flight in 1968, and they told NASA. And then the second thing is we had intelligence information that the Russians were going to put a man or men around the moon in the late fall of '68. As a matter of fact, they sent a spacecraft called Zond 5 with small animals on board. It went to the moon and came back again, landed in the Pacific, but the reentry was such that they hadn't perfected it yet and the animals had died. And then they fell back. They were very concerned people, and they got another Zond spacecraft and the proper Proton, the rocket, and they sent it around the moon, and it was fairly successful. Then they debated, well, we want to make sure, but the astronauts that were planned to go wanted to go, and as they debated in this country, NASA made a very bold decision But what they said was, look, if Apollo 7 around the Earth, and this to test out the command module, if it proves successful, we'll then send Apollo 8 to the moon, and on the Saturn V and the first two test vehicles both had things wrong with them, but they felt that the third test vehicle would be okay, and that's exactly how it came to pass.
So risky and so much drama. Why wasn't a movie made of Apollo 8 instead?
That's a good question. I don't know. That would be a good thing to have, Apollo 8. But it was so successful that there wasn't any real, Houston, we got a problem type deals.
Maybe they'll make one now.
Yeah.
Is this true that one of you guys on Apollo 8 actually recorded a message to be played for the family in the event you didn't return alive?
Both of them did. Both Frank Borman and Bill Anders videotaped something, darling, I didn't make it, I want to be. And I told them, I didn't do this. I said, if you're uncomfortable about not going, why are you going? I mean, if you have any doubts about the success of this mission, don't go. I mean, you've got to have a positive attitude in anything you do, and you walk into this thing by saying it's going to be successful. Now, I thought there might have been things going wrong where we maybe didn't able to orbit the moon and we had to come back somehow. But so I never told Marilyn that I was going to leave anything positive for her.
So when Marilyn found out, I mean, did you ever think, wait, she's going to find out that the others did this and I didn't? Was that an issue at all?
Well, it might have been an issue, but I made up for that. Before I went to the moon, months before, I went to Neiman Marcus, and I knew the manager at the Houston thing, and I ordered a little mink jacket. She never had a mink coat before, a mink jacket. And I wrote on there, to Marilyn Lovell from The Man on the Moon. Now, and they held it. And on Christmas Eve, as we were circling the moon, a limo came up to our house, and a guy with a chauffeur's outfit on, and he brought this package, and it had a little Earth and it had a moon on it, and gave it to Marilyn, and she opened it up and it said, to Marilyn Lovell from Jim from Man on the Moon.
Oh.
Now, see, I've got
my
an,
God.
I've got an.
I'm gonna cry.
No, I've got a complaint. I've always had this problem. That set such a bad precedent for the rest of us married guys. We can never use the excuse, I was busy, I didn't have time, I didn't think of it.
I was on the moon.
Yeah, because the wives will bring that up. Thanks a lot.
We'll be back with more Look Who's in Booth 1 after this.
Stay with us. One more quick question about the dangers of Apollo 8. Didn't even NASA say the chances of you guys coming back and it being a successful mission only about 50-50?
That's what I've heard. I didn't look for what the odds were going to be. I didn't express to Marilyn what I thought the odds were going to be. Again, like I said, you got to have a positive attitude. You've got to go in there with the idea that things are going to be successful. And if they fail, well, then they fail.
You've talked about how 240,000 miles in space, you put your thumb up to the window, and I'm just wondering, why did you do that, and why did it affect you so much?
I think Apollo 8 really affected my whole attitude on life and what I thought before and what I think now. Yes, at 240,000 miles, I suddenly looked back at the small Earth, just a little blue and white ball out there. And you know that my world suddenly expanded to infinity. You know, usually our worlds are conceived in small things, like in this room. Our world really exists within these walls. But out there, I could see everything. And suddenly when I put my thumb up to the window, I could hide the Earth completely behind my thumb. And I thought about it, 5 billion people. Everything I ever knew is behind my thumb. And then I thought about, you know, thinking about life in general. I've often heard that expression, I hope to go to heaven when I die. I hope to go to heaven when I die. And here I am 240,000 miles out into space, whether that's heaven or not, I don't know. But I said, that's wrong. I went to heaven when I was born. Just think. I arrived on a planet of the proper mass to have the gravity to contain water and an atmosphere, the very essentials for life. I arrived on a planet orbiting a star just at the right distance, not too far out to be too cold, in too close to be too hot, just at the right distance to absorb that star's energy. And it was that energy that caused life to evolve in the beginning. And so my approach to this from that flight of Apollo 8 was that in reality, that God has given us a stage upon which to perform. And how the play is going to turn out is strictly up to us.
Wow.
God's work must truly be our own, as they say.
That's right. In other words, because if you realize it, the Earth is a small planet. It's just one among 9 in our solar system. It is a mere speck in our Milky Way galaxy, and it's lost in oblivion in the universe. I mean, so, you know,
We are a miracle.
we're really a nothing when you want to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Right.
The Gemini 12 capsule is at the Adler Planetarium, thanks to you, and Apollo 8 is at the Museum of Science and Industry. What do you think about when you go visit those old spacecrafts?
Well, it brings back old memories. I donated a lot of the space artifacts that I had to the Adler. They own the flight manual on Apollo 8, where we read from the first, the Genesis is there. And I like to take people occasionally to go through there, you know, and in fact, I think this next September, we're going to have another celestial ball at the Adler, and we're going to talk about a little bit about space, maybe about Apollo 8, and Museum of Science Industry is going to have an Apollo 8 function. So
Yeah.
we're Apollo 8 is still here in Chicago.
And it's a big year for Apollo 8, 50th anniversary. A couple of books on Apollo 8, and people are getting into it now.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing because, you know, we're few and far between now. I mean, a lot of my contemporaries are no longer there. And it's sort of wondering me because I was in the initial selection back in 1958 for the Mercury program. I went to get physicals with John Glenn and Al Shepard and Wally Schirra and Deke Slayton. And of the 32 that went there, I was the only one to flunk that physical and sent back. And of course, then they picked the 7 out of the 32.
Why did you flunk?
I had it known as a high bilirubin. Now that is a pink pigment in your blood due to, I don't know,
Bile or something, right?
Liver.
Well, sometimes it's due to when you're born, you have,
Right.
yeah, I forget. Anyway, so I flunked it, but I didn't tell the Navy that I flunked the physical. I just came back and did my normal work in flying airplanes. And so when NASA needed a second group for the Gemini program, the Navy called me up and said, look, do you want to try again for that? And I said, sure, why not? I had my physical taken at San Antonio by the Air Force. They didn't know what a high bilirubin was.
That's great story.
So I got in.
You got in. The torch of space exploration has been passed from the government to the private sector, and I'm wondering, how do you feel about these billionaire entrepreneurs who have taken over the space race now?
Well, luck with them. If they have the money to do the same thing that the government did is fine. But I often question the commercialization of space, because in any commercial project, eventually you have to make a profit, right? You have an idea, you get a bunch of investors together, you build a prototype, you find out that it's a pretty good idea. So then you go sell it, market it, and hopefully you can make a profit. So spent like SpaceX, had an idea, working very good, got a group of investors together, and I think Elon Musk put about $100 million of his own money into that whole thing. But over the early period of the years, the government put in over $1 billion, $200 million. And then Elon Musk made this booster that takes projects or stuff up to the International Space Station and sells that procedure to NASA. So it's a great idea. If I could only get somebody to give me money to develop an idea and then sell it to them.
Right. We'll finish up our conversation with Captain Lovell after this.
Apollo 13 turned out to be your final mission. You were supposed to walk on the moon, but because of the explosion, that was impossible. How did you deal with that disappointment? It's something you always wanted to do. You never got a chance to do it.
Yeah, I was disappointed, but it was only after I had successfully landed back on Earth. At the time of the explosion, of course, was one of just trying to get back. Even though I was disappointed for about 5 or 6 years after the flight, or even longer than that, but then suddenly I thought to myself, actually, that was probably the best thing that could have happened to NASA. I mean, we had successful flights to the moon before. Apollo 8, of course, went there. Apollo 10, 11, and 12, 11 and 12 landing there. The novelty had worn off. The populace had started to look for something else, and you found the liftoff on Apollo 13 on page 78 of the weather page of the New York Times, and it was one of these things where, and suddenly, 2 days out, boom, an explosion occurs, and all of a sudden there's that interest. What happened to them? Are they in danger? What's happening to them? And then from years, and then starting to write the book on Apollo 13, I thought to myself, NASA is very fortunate. This explosion happened when it should have happened, at the proper time it happened, because if it didn't happen on the way to the moon at the proper time, either we would have been lost if it happened earlier or happened after we were on the lunar surface. So it got the populace to think about the space program again, and so I sacrificed landing on the moon in efforts that NASA might keep on going.
Yeah, we became blasé, and that turned out to be actually a good PR move.
It was a great PR
because we
move.
appreciated the men and women of NASA so much.
Why didn't you look for another opportunity to walk on the moon?
I would have loved to have another opportunity. As a matter of fact, that question had come up. In the first 2 flights to the moon, the NASA hierarchy got together with them and said to the crew, and said, look, if there is a problem at all, don't try to force going to the moon. We'll bring it back and we'll give you the very next flight. They didn't say that on Apollo 13. And so after the flight, we got back safely, there was a press conference, and the NASA management was all behind the 3 of us, and we were talking to all the press had come in, and it was 2 weeks, and that question came up. A newspaper guy said, Jim, well, are you going to ask for another flight? Why not? And for a brief moment, knowing that NASA management was back there, and I was going to say, well, definitely yes, they promised another flight. But then, out in the middle of the audience, a hand came up with a thumb that went down. And it was my wife. And then I looked at her, and I said to the audience, no, I think this is my last flight.
You once told me that you thought Hanks did a good job, and apart from depicting a problem and the astronauts fighting up there that Hollywood put in, apart from that, you approved of what they did in the movie.
Yes, most of the movie is absolutely correct. The one thing about that argument was Ron Howard could not show exhaustion, suspense, by just putting a camera near a fellow's face with perspiration. It had to have some oral confrontation to it. And so and so we read the script and we said to him, we didn't argue. There was no argument here. And he says, I know it. And so he says, but we have to show some anxiety to the whole thing. And so I said, will it sell? And he said, yes. Okay.
I have to tell you, I keep watching it when I'm flipping around and it's on. I stay with it. It's really a terrific movie. I enjoy it. And how is it to have Tom Hanks play you?
It was pretty nice. I saw Tom Hanks, of course, for the first time I really got to know him. When he was, Ron Howard asked him to play the part. We had Kevin Costner was the fact that when Ron Howard asked me originally, who do I want to play my part? And I had just seen this movie, Dances with Wolves. I said, well, Kevin Costner was about my age when I did The Flying, and he looked somewhat like me at that time. Yeah, Kevin Costner. Well, he couldn't do it. He had this dances, or he had Water World or something like that was going on in the movie. And so Tom Hanks always wanted to play the part of an astronaut. I didn't know that at the time, but then Ron Howard asked him, and he took it right away. He said, oh yes, I'll play that part. But then when he heard that I asked for Kevin Costner, first of all, he never has forgiven me on that.
He still gives you a hard time about
He
that?
still gives me a hard time. I was at my house one time when we're just planning the movie. I have a home down in Texas, and I had an airplane. And my home was only about 15 minutes from the airport in Austin. So I picked him up on my airplane. But he had never been in airplanes much before this time. And so
in a private plane, you mean? In a small
I had a
plane?
private plane. I was flying, so I was going to take him from Austin to my house, and I got him up to fly. But I thought to myself, if this guy's going to play the part of a naval aviator, of an astronaut, of a test pilot, I got to get started right away. So although it was only 15 minutes to my home from Austin, I took an hour and a half. I did things I would only do in test pilot school, going upside down and all that, and he hung in there, but I could see that he was getting kind of bad. And finally I leveled off and I asked him, I said, Tom, what was the latest movie that you did? He said, Gump. And I said, Gump? He said, yep. Forrest Gump. And then I thought to myself, I remember that movie. I said, maybe you should be playing my part.
Did you use the flight bag? Did he need the
No.
Oh, he was all right.
He landed in there, but he'll never forgive me.
Well, listen, as Marianne knows, I'm a space geek, and I could continue this conversation forever, but we hear from Mission Control. It's time for splashdown and re-entry. So our thanks to Captain Jim Lovell. It's been great chatting with you again. All the best to you and the family.
So great to see you.
Well, Bob and Marianne, it's good to be here, relive old times, I guess, is what we're doing.
Happy 90th again, and happy 50th anniversary Apollo 8.
And 66th
Wedding
anniversary.
Wedding
Yeah,
anniversary.
let's not forget that.
Time changes, but we're still hanging in there.
Good.
And we'll see you next time right here in Booth 1.